Let's move on and now talk about cognitive processes in later life. Information processing definitely changes as adults get older. Age differences in divided attention tasks depend on the level of difficulty. On easy tasks, we see there are no differences in information processing, but on harder tasks, younger adults do better than older adults. Older adults' psychomotor speed, or the speed with which a person can make a specific response, is slower than younger adults. The amount of slowing is lessened if older adults have practice or expertise on the task, but we see that psychomotor slowing is a universal phenomenon. It's a really good predictor of cognitive performance, and the prediction is best when the task requires little effort. When the task requires more effort, it's more difficult. So working memory then is actually a better predictor of performance. So this slowing in psychomotor speed, particularly in more ambiguous situations, occurs because older adults they take longer to decide whether they need to respond. And so this can explain these higher driving fatality rates in very old people. So we see that this slowing is due to these physiological brain-related changes, so these declines in the brain's white matter. If you remember, white matter is the myelination in the brain that speeds conduction. So declines in the brain's white matter aid neural transmission. So if that's declining, neural transmission is going to take more time. Working memory also declines with age. So working memory involves the processes and structures involved in holding information in the mind and simultaneously using it to solve a problem, make a decision, or perform some function or learn new information. So working memory is really an umbrella term for many similar short-term holding computational processes that happen in your brain related to a wide range of cognitive skills and knowledge domains. So working memory has a relatively small capacity, and it deals with information that is being used right at that moment. So what we see is that working memory generally declines with age. But again, that poor working memory and psychomotor speed predict age-related declines in cognitive performance. If the task is more difficult, working memory is a really good predictor of cognitive performance. If it's an easier task, then psychomotor speed is a better predictor. So poor memory is often viewed as an inevitable part of aging. And the study of memory on aging generally focuses on two types of memory: explicit memory and implicit memory. So explicit memory is the deliberate and conscious remembering of information that is learned and remembered at a specific time. There are two types of explicit memory that we'll discuss: episodic and semantic. Episodic memory is the general class of memory having to do with the conscious recollection of information from a specific time or event, remembering an episode of something. Semantic memory is the general class of memory concerning the remembering of meanings of words or concepts, not tied to any specific time or event. And then implicit memory is the unconscious remembering of information learned at some earlier time. So age differences here are going to depend on the type of task. So learning sequences, we see do show age differences, whereas learning spatial context actually does not. There are no differences in implicit memory here concerning age. So let's come back to explicit memory and talk about age differences here. Well, in laboratory memory tasks requiring free recall, so this would be more testing your episodic explicit memory, older adults almost always do worse than younger adults. They omit more information, they remember information that wasn't actually presented, and they repeat more previously recalled items. On recognition tasks, those differences are smaller, but you still typically perform worse with age. So older adults, they're not as good at spontaneously using memory strategies to help themselves remember, but they can learn to use these strategies effectively, and we'll talk more about that in just a second. Semantic explicit memory, we see that age differences on semantic memory tasks are typically absent in normative aging, but they can be found with people with dementia. So we actually see only in people with dementia do we see age differences regarding semantic memory, but for older adults versus younger adults in terms of semantic memory, so remembering the meaning of words, we don't really see any age differences here. So again, one thing that older adults can do is learn how to effectively use memory strategies. So let's now talk about some different memory aids. So memory training can be accomplished in many different ways, and a useful framework is to combine explicit and implicit memory distinctions with external and internal types of memory aids. So this creates the EI, the explicit implicit, EI, external internal, O framework. The O is the, oh, now I remember. So that's where the EI-EIO comes from. But let's differentiate between the external and internal aids. External aids are memory aids that rely on environmental resources like notebooks or calendars. Internal aids are memories that rely on mental processes like imagery. So I'll give you some examples here. Alphabetic searching. So this is something my grandparents do when they're trying to remember someone's name. They start going through the alphabet one letter at a time to see if it sparks a memory. So they'll be trying to come up with the name and they'll be like A, B, C, right? So this is an example of an explicit internal aid. Another example is like asking someone else to remind you of something. So asking someone else to help you remember or remember something. This would be an example of an external aid. So this EI-EIO framework allows different types of memory to be combined with different types of aids. So, like an example of an explicit external would be an appointment book or a grocery list. So you're trying to remember explicit memory, but it's an external aid. It's something outside of you, like an appointment book. An example of explicit internal would be like mental imagery or just rote rehearsal. So it's an internal aid because it's kind of in your mind that you're thinking it through, you're using it. But it's explicit memory. It's an explicit type of memory. An example of implicit external, this is a little bit more tricky, but this would be like color-coded maps or icons representing the time of day and the number of pills to take to remember to take your medication. External implicit combinations are going to be more widely used with children. Nevertheless, they can be applied for older adults in some situations. So like many nursing homes use different color schemes to designate different wings or sections of a building. And because people process color-coded aspects of buildings automatically, this is like the implicit nature of this external cue makes it ideal for people who might otherwise have difficulty learning and remembering new information. And then implicit internal is also a little bit more tricky, but these are kind of the associations that you make internally, like conditioning, for example. So one implicit internal memory aid that's been proven to be really powerful is a technique called spaced retrieval. So these researchers, they worked with people with Alzheimer's to see if they could help people with Alzheimer's learn new things with this technique. So the researchers were able to actually teach people with Alzheimer's disease the names of the staff who worked with them, even though those those participants had no idea of when or where they acquired that information. So when you're doing spaced retrieval, you're basically trying to choose some type of thing to remember, so a name, for example, and then you'd ask a question to elicit that name, and if that person says the name correctly, you would move on. If they don't say the name correctly, you would tell them the right answer and then have them repeat it back to you. If you're able to move on, you would wait like about 15 seconds and you would do it again. And then you would wait a little bit longer and you would do it again. So this spaced retrieval has been shown to be really effective in helping even individuals with Alzheimer's learn new